around energy and taking the energy transition and connecting with our community. So we're going to be talking with Betty Lowe, and she's going to share with us what they're prioritizing in it. Also, we have a meetup on 6/2 for low carbon fuels. That'll be back in person. We'll have a location for you hopefully soon. And one thing that came out today that I forgot to put in here is how many of you follow the Cal Seed? Well, Cal Seed is it's small investments, seed grant money for startup ideas. And we had some startups from our region that got follow-on funding like Repurpose Energy and or some of the other ones. Tolo, the Thomas's photography company.
Yeah, photogrammetry, right? And
Yeah.
then we had Kepler Energy. They've got a storage device, and KWH bot, which is very interesting. It's a robotic EV charger that goes around and finds people who have signed up to have their cars charged, and the robot plugs the thing in, and when your car is charged, then it moves on to another one. So
definitely going to try to connect with them and bring them to one of our CleanStart perspectives.
Yeah,
because that sounds super exciting. All right, we got Brandon Rose coming in. All right.
I would say too that it'd be really good if you join the conversation with Bob Weisenmuller. Bob was the chair of the Energy Commission, I think for 7 years, maybe longer. But he and I were together at the Energy Commission. He went out and formed a consulting firm. And right now, because of what he had done to build things up at the Energy Commission and being a close ally of Jerry Brown, he serves on a lot of international and national energy committees now. So he's really got a good sense of where things are going and sort of where he sees problem areas and opportunities. So that'll be a particularly good discussion. Just put that on your calendar for 5/17, and I think it's in the morning, right? Isn't it 9 o'clock?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at 9 o'clock. I would just put a link to it in the chat. So if you want to go there and connect with it, that would, it's a great opportunity to do it. Also, this is being recorded and we edit and put them all up on YouTube. So if you want to go check out a lot of the grid discussions that are on YouTube, we've got a lot of them now. And there's a link to them too if you follow and like us. So today we're talking about the grid. Most importantly, how kind of people interact with the grid and how you have to form kind of platforms or ways that, behind the meter connects with in front of the meter, and how, people can leverage that, how they can connect with it, and some of the opportunities around it. We have companies that have some unique approaches to it with reimagining the breaker box. We have people who are working on putting batteries in strategic locations that can best find arbitrage on the grid. And we'll have SMUD who's, and there he is. And we'll have SMUD talking about how they're hoping to tie all this together. Now, I would like you all to please welcome, welcome Denver, Ezra Beeman, Managing Director of Energia, Scott Silva, I've got to update his title there, sorry, of SPAN, and Denver Hines of SMUD, who works on their as a smart energy systems engineer. Now, I'm going to assume that smart applies to both Denver and the energy systems. So I'm really looking forward to that. And we're going to start off with Denver. I'm going to go ahead and make you co-host and let you take over.
Well, I'll leave that for you to decide as I get going here. Sorry, I just jumped into the Zoom platform here, and I want to figure out how to share a couple slides with you. And we don't use Zoom routinely, so point me to it if I don't find it quickly.
Okay. All right. If you're looking on the Zoom control panel, there's something that says share. I'm going to stop share, but yours will say screen share. And if you click screen share, it'll let you choose which screen to share.
So you got to be on full screen, and it's the green button at the bottom.
Got it. Now, if I push it, is it going to share my whole screen or give me the chance to share a
It'll give you
window?
the chance to, it'll give you a chance. Microsoft Teams is clawing back some market share in the past 6 months, I've noticed.
I think that's entirely due
Okay.
to
Well,
SMUD.
yeah, sorry I wasn't here a little bit more promptly. I saw the updated invite and took the chance to play a quick game of catch with my son before we got started here.
Who won?
Who won?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a game of catch. Everybody's a winner. Everybody's a winner. Let's see. Is there a presenter mode for Microsoft PowerPoint? If not, you guys are just going to have to look at my notes with me.
If you click present slides, it should go to it, hopefully.
Oh, there it is.
Yes.
Got it.
Did that do it?
Well, it's probably not sharing that screen. So why don't we just look at your slides with you and I'll edit
That's
it.
fine. You can just look at my notes. I got nothing to hide here. We're glad to be here. I'm disappointed we didn't get to meet in person tonight. There hasn't been a lot of that in recent history, and I was looking forward to the chance to getting out of my little home office and having a little interaction with the panel and interaction with the guests to the forum tonight as well. We'll revert to virtual, and apologies in advance if I start to sound like a computer, because that tends to happen when I present in these virtual environments. I know a few of my colleagues have been here recently to talk with the CleanStart forum about some of our virtual power plant programs and about a zero carbon flow program. And I shouldn't assume that everybody is intimately familiar with SMUD, but I'll give you a quick overview of both of those, and then we'll go into a little discussion about one way that we're looking at load flexibility, and in addition to all the virtual power plant offerings that we have here at SMUD. So as your community-owned, not-for-profit electric service provider, it is our purpose to enhance the quality of life for our customers and our community by providing them with reliable and affordable electricity, and evermore leading this transition to a clean energy future on their behalf. For decades now, we've been pioneering energy systems and programs that partner with our customers to allow them to flex their energy away from expensive, inefficient, and polluting sources of power supply. On our supply side at this point, we are just over 50% non-carbon emitting resources. And as of 2020, we've made the bold commitment to accelerate to zero carbon on our supply side by 2030. Less than 8 years away now, though I just realized last week that by 2030 probably does include the year of 2030 rather than the front of 2030 being a hard stop for us. So we just gained an extra 12 months in my mind, and still not enough time, but we're doing everything we can to set up the systems and partnerships that we're going to need to have to reach that goal. Fortunately for us, we're right here smack dab in the middle of California, serving this capital region, where we have access to a lot of innovative partners and access to a lot of thought leaders and regulators to help make this transition, which isn't one that SMUD that can do alone. Really something that we have to have partnerships across the industry and across the board to lead the way towards zero carbon. Looking at our zero carbon plan a little bit more closely, we've divided that up into 4 pillars that we're going to approach to address how we get to zero carbon. The first piece of that on your left here is the plan to retire several of our large gas-fired power plants, getting rid of that fossil fuel burn. Second piece of the plan is to replace the capacity of those plants with proven clean technologies like solar and utility scale battery storage. Those two pieces together, we've got a pretty tight plan. Oh, sorry. To get us 90% of the way to zero carbon. The third piece of the plan is really figuring out how to get that last 10% of carbon squeezed out of our system by exploring new technologies, exploring new business models, and hoping for some heroes to show up in the terms of partnerships and heroes to show up in the terms of technology innovation that we can access and scale and deliver on our customers' behalf by 2030. This is bold. It's unlike utilities to go into a plan this ambitious without all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. But I'm proud to be a part of that bold vision, and really excited to see what we can do over the next 8 years now. Inherent in this plan is flexibility, and the ability not only to deal with changing externalities, but really to be an organization with technologies that are built for change as well. We can try and forecast and predict and prepare all that we want, but what is very evident in this environment that we operate in today is that things are changing. Policies are changing, technologies are changing, customer needs are changing, climate is changing, and the global social environment is changing. And so we need to really prepare systems and technologies that put us in a place to continue to be flexible. The last pillar of our zero carbon plan is to make sure that we have a financial model that maintains affordability for our customers, that we pursue partnerships that bring in best of breed contributors and grant funding, and shared investment models, so that as we take lead, the rest of the industry can join us in this fight and follow shortly behind. Taking a look at what that can look like locally, we're seeing distributed energy resources proliferate on our grid, whether we're ready or not. Luckily, we are ready. We've made a lot of investments in our smart grid infrastructure over the last decade to prepare for greater visibility, greater control, and better signaling to our customers and their capabilities to be participants in this new energy system and new energy economy that we're trying to enable. No longer is the grid something that we need to manage using a finite set of supply side resources. We really need to partner with our customers and the resources that they're adopting for value streams that aren't wholly energy and certainly not wholly utility related. They're driving EVs for their great road feel, low maintenance, clean fuel supply, and adopting other distributed energy resources like stationary storage and HVAC systems controlled by smart thermostats, because they complement their quality of life. But they're underutilized if we can't find ways to incorporate the capabilities of those resources into our system to be shared with our neighbors. And that's what we really need to pursue here at SMUD is an advanced, modernized grid that allows customers through economic means and the existing electrical means to share the capabilities of their resources with the rest of the community. Luckily, we have this explosion of IoT devices to help us in this transition. We know that our customers expect their electricity consumption to be a set and forget proposition. They're not interested in micromanaging their energy use all hours of every day. But these intelligent, connected devices that are landing in their homes more and more frequently these days can really be coupled to our energy system to give it the distributed control and visibility that we need, not only to manage variable energy supply in bulk, but also to apply it very locally to our distribution circuits to help us manage the costs of upgrading circuits and transformers and the very local infrastructure that we manage on behalf of our customers. If we look at this from a grid perspective, we need to figure out how to couple those things together. These advanced energy systems and distributed energy resources and all the computation and communications capability that are arriving with them these days. Bring that information into our grid where we can move away from complicated rule-based management of all these resources to more complex, statistically based orchestration of these resources. We need to no longer think about a bunch of individual pieces of a puzzle, but really a very large and continuous problem that we need to solve flexibly. As customers adopt new technologies, as standards change, and again, as the impacts of uncertainty in our climate, in our region, change the grids rather rapidly, more rapidly than our infrastructure planning and our rate design practices can keep up with. We think about this as we approach zero carbon on the operations side as an inversion to the century-old paradigm of managing supply to meet load. Forever, we've been forecasting load and turning on and off power plants in near real time to make sure the system is in balance at all time. As we bring on all these renewable energy resources to achieve that zero carbon goal, more and more we need to think about a system where we forecast variability in energy production based on weather events, and that we help influence demand to meet the availability of the system to deliver that clean renewable energy. On the wholesale side, we've developed market-based systems in recent history that help manage that supply and demand of large resources using economic tools, pricing, for example. But at the wholesale level, these are very complex systems and really only accessible to large firms that are able to make big capital investments in the infrastructure that's required to participate. These systems are largely inaccessible to our customers, and the economic efficiencies associated with them are largely inaccessible to our customers today. There's a vision shared by a lot of leaders in our industry right now for how we move to more interconnected systems that use the visibility that a lot of the sensors and Internet of Things devices lend us, the control of those systems remotely, and really orchestrate those in a, again, I'm going to use the word complex way, not complicated, but complex, meaning the system can handle a lot of information in a non-deterministic way to balance outcomes with inputs.
I'm just saying.
There's a regulatory push for more granular pricing coming from DOE, coming from the CPUC, coming from the CEC. The two California agencies have rulemakings open that are pushing utilities towards more dynamic pricing. In that transition, we see our job at SMUD is to making sure that the customer is the centerpiece of that transition towards more transactive systems, that we maintain our pact with them to make their energy service simple and seamless, and of course, always affordable and reliable. We don't expect that our customers all want to be participants again in a minute-to-minute energy market and be exposed to the volatility, or even exposed to the attention and engagement that an engineered system like that could theoretically provide from an economic standpoint. So our job is to design programs that can get their intelligent devices to behave in a way that is responsive to our grid needs and our energy systems, while shielding them from the complexity, using technology to automate responses to grid needs. Again, I think a couple of my colleagues have presented to this group over the last about some of our virtual power plants that we're building to to really use aggregation providers to firm up the response of large groups of resources to behave in a way that they look like a power plant, that we can ramp them up and down and turn them on and off. And there's some limitations to customer autonomy in that case, and some significant complexities in the oversight that we have to have and the technology that we have to implement, and the rules that need to be followed in order to get a group of aggregated resources to look like a power plant. Towards the left side of this spectrum we're looking at here, we're talking more about approaches that leverage co-investment with our customers, give them autonomy in the decisions that they make in response to the changing economics of the grid, and really create transparency and control for them in deciding how aggressively, based on context, they are able to generate the savings associated with more transparent and granular pricing. It's the most cost-effective way today for us to change the shape of our demand, that is sending price signals to our customers. In 2019, we launched our time of use rate. Almost all of our customers, residential and commercial, are on a time of use rate today. Few have opted out into a flat rate. It's one that sends them a signal that provides the average cost shape of energy to them across the season. So the price schedule is the same for every summer day across 4 months. It's definitely a move in the right direction, but unfortunately that block pricing isn't reflective of the day-to-day variation and volatility that we get in our commodity costs, or what's really happening with the system under stressed conditions where we have chokes in supply or transmission or extreme weather. The next evolution of that is this critical peak pricing that we are launching this summer. Oh, sorry. That price gives them a 50 cent price increase for up to 50 event hours during the summer when our system is most stressed. We're enrolling customers with stationary storage systems that also get that 50 cent addition to the credit that we give them for exporting energy back to that grid. We're recruiting storage customers quite heavily onto this system because they have the most to benefit by storing up that clean, inexpensive energy during the middle of the day, and then helping dispatch their systems and provide energy back to the system during peak periods when they can sell it at a premium to us, and help us to avoid reliability concerns or the high economic impacts of that stressed market. In exchange, they get about a 10% reduction on the other 2,800 hours of the summer for any energy consumption they have. So for customers that have flexibility, devices that can respond automatically, it can result in significant bill savings for them. To help that, we have built a platform that sends automated event signals to them. It sends price schedules to them so that their technology can really offload the burden of having to look for those events and be responsive to it. Working with our vendors in these automation spaces, we've put together a very simple internet-based API that allows them to access these TOU schedules, these critical peak pricing event schedules, and some other pilot schedules that are much more granular, that provide locational costs and wholesale energy costs, where we're trying to move further down this road of price-based optimization based on granular cost avoidance. Electric vehicles and stationary storage systems are going to be our prime targets for load flexibility as we pursue zero carbon and the electrification of transportation industry and electrification of the building industry and complement to it. We're preparing to launch a managed charging program later this year, where customers will receive staggered pricing discount periods, so that we can, in a neighborhood where we have congested EV charging, we can spread out neighbors' charging intervals So they're not all hitting the same transformer at the same time. Typically, we have transformers that are designed for a 5 kW load associated with a typical home, whereas we're seeing vehicles arrive on the market alongside 20 kW chargers. So that's like 4 homes showing up on a planned circuit overnight. And if one neighbor comes home with a Tesla, you can bet the other ones are looking at it and thinking about it too. We've run a few pilots in the EV charging space and learned that drivers are very responsive to price signals. The results of one of these pilots is shown above, where we were able to send price signals that incorporated wholesale pricing dips in the middle of the day alongside renewable energy forecasts. And customers were very willing to choose to have the schedule of their charging shifted to those midday hours to maximize that renewable energy resource and to minimize that price. So in pursuing this price-based automation, we understand that the big challenges for us are modeling this response in a way that we are sure that we're going to get a dependable and accurate load reduction from the aggregation of customers and their technologies that are going to respond to it. If we can't count on that reduction in load, then we can't avoid the costs associated with the supply or the infrastructure that would otherwise take to serve that load. So we've got to start running these tests, analyzing the responses of the system, and really developing models that know that show us how to use those levers to get that response and avoid that supply side or infrastructure investment. The other big challenge for us is making sure that we can deliver this complex system in a way that adds value to our customers' lives, that really simplifies their decision making and lowers their electricity bills. So the customer front and the operations front are still significant opportunities for innovation, significant opportunities for exploration, and really for learning on our behalf and our partners. So that's the end of my presentation. It's a sort of a roadmap as to where we're starting and going with price-based load flexibility, and here to make an open call to innovators that we need the rest of the technology community to figure out how to consume that pricing information that we want to make open and accessible and deliver to our customers this clean energy experience in a way that's simple and affordable, and leave the reliability piece up to us.
Great.
Excellent presentation there, Denver. I think one of the biggest part of the SMUD 2030 goal is also keeping rates low as the lowest ones in the state, which really sets up, limits what you can do, but is very ambitious.
Denver, do you have any goals or targets in mind for how much load flexibility you think you can get through what you're doing versus the battery storage investments and other things?
Yeah, we do. I know some of my colleagues have shared some of those graphics in this forum. I can grab them real quick and put them up here.
Well, no, I mean, just in terms of what you're doing. I mean, people are doing the virtual power plants, with some bigger customers, the battery storage, but are you looking to be able to flex 100 megawatts of load, 500 megawatts of load? Just what's your sense?
This is part of that 10% and that really unknown business model that we haven't been able to firm up or make certain. On the strategy side, we have all those numbers, and I don't want to misquote them, so I'm going to just grab them real quick and give them to you.
Okay.
All right. Well, that'll be a good part of the upcoming discussion
Yeah,
we have at the end.
Yeah, we'll take that in the discussion. Thank you. At any rate, great presentation.
Excellent. Yeah. Next, I'd like to welcome Scott Sylvia, Regional Sales Manager of SPAN. If any of you are unfamiliar with SPAN, I would suggest you look it up. But one thing that I think a lot of you are familiar with, and I know especially Peter is familiar with, is having to replace your power or your your breaker box and all the issues that go with it. I also know Guy Hall that I saw in here is very familiar with finding out that someone did the box wrong and that you have a whole host of problems. So now we're going to hear from Scott Sylvia and let him take over about their innovation of how they're rethinking I keep calling it a breaker box, but I'm probably going to get corrected on that. All right, ready, Scott?
Yes, indeed. It's a breaker box for all intents and purposes. That's fine.
Oh, good.
Am I allowed to share here?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Can we see that?
Yep.
Good to go. Awesome. So I'm Scott Sylvia with SPAN. Thank you very much, Thomas, for the introduction. And Denver, that was a great presentation previous to this one. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at SPAN already, in that we are installing and deploying these systems across the United States at this point in time, and sort of our mission to decarbonize, right? We're all here to hopefully decarbonize as quickly as we possibly can. With the use of technology and those partnerships with utilities across the country. And we're hoping to be a part of that mission as well for everybody to get to the point to where we can reach our decarbonization goals. So what SPAN is we essentially reinvented 100-year-old technology and made it smart to keep up with the changing home energy landscape. We all know that the at-home level of energy consumption is changing at a rapid pace. Most people's first foyer into electrification is going to be that electric vehicle charger. We also have people adding electric heat pumps for the furnace and for the air conditioning, and just electrifying their homes in many different regards. That adds a lot of current to the home that would have otherwise most likely been a gas appliance, right? Or in the case of an EV charger, would not have been there at all because the car is gas powered. So we essentially reinvented the electrical panel, which we felt very much so needed to be done. And what makes SPAN smart is that every circuit can be metered and controlled in real time. It's not just a passive safety device like a standard electrical panel or breaker box is, but it's an intelligent gateway for electricity being used, generated, and stored at the home. And it partners very well, although it doesn't need to be partnered with, but partners very well with solar and storage systems that we are integrated with at this time. So that's what SPAN is. It's an intelligent load center for all intents and purposes. The reason that we created this intelligent load center is because there is a large increase in electric vehicles being sold in real time, and it's an exponential growth. There's been a 70% increase since 2016, with 80% of all charging being done at the home, right? That's a vast majority of the charging that folks are doing with their car. It makes sense. They're coming home at night and they want to charge their car at home. There is a forecasted growth of solar being paired with battery storage of 90% growth by 2023. Folks are really looking to centralize clean energy generation at a local grid level within the home, and need to be able to manage that generation at the home level as best and as elegantly as they can. And 50 million US homes have required panel upgrades to enable whole home electrification, or in many cases, any electrification at all. Many folks run into the issue of not being able to fully charge at 11 kW because their service, when they do bring home that nice shiny Tesla, does not accommodate an 11 kW level 2 48 amp vehicle charger. And many times they need a service upgrade. 50 plus million folks have required at least a panel upgrade to enable whole home electrification. Why is that important? And why is that critical to what organizations and utilities like SMUD are doing across the nation? They all have decarbonization goals. They all have electrification goals. Without home electrification, the clean grid national residential emissions curve here plateaus at a certain point in time. We need residential electrification to clean up the grid. As you can see here, we want the darker purple curve. That's the goal, not the lighter purple curve, because as you can tell, that is going to plateau, and that is not a good thing, obviously, for climate change, and there are downstream implications to that happening, right? The goal is the darker purple curve. So we believe that SPAN and local load management systems like SPAN are important to allow utilities to reach their electrification, the residential electrification goals within their given communities. Utility service limitations can slow electrification. The typical cost for utility service upgrades can range from $2,000 all the way upwards of $20,000 if you need to do what I'm showing here is, you know, trench underground and add new service underground, depending on, you know, whether it is overhead or underground. That's going to drastically change the timeline, the permitting, and the cost of service upgrades, right? And in many cases, especially in Northern California, where there's sort of a hotbed of need for service increases, we're hearing project delays for service upgrades of sometimes upwards of 9 to 12 months, a whole year in some cases, to even be able to have a utility come out and do a service upgrade. 59% of homes in the United States actually don't have a 200 amp service. And if you're looking to do any sort of electrification on less than a 200 amp service, most electricians are going to recommend that you get a service upgrade, right? 41% or so of homes do have a 200 amp service, especially if they were built in the last 25 years or so. That there is still a consideration of a potential service upgrade if there is whole home electrification going on when you're getting into the square footage greater than, say, 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. So in both scenarios, whether you have a 200 amp service home or a 125 amp or less service home, to electrify and curb gas and cut the gas at the curb, there are service limitation considerations to be made there. SPAN allows for certain homeowners, and in many cases, the home to be fully electrified with an EV car charger as well, without needing a service upgrade potentially. We do believe that that the product suite and the software allow for this to happen, and we have deployed systems in this scenario in many cases throughout California and throughout the country as well. So that's sort of a big value prop to what we're doing and driving to help decarbonization and to help folks residentially electrify. That's the smarter approach, what I just alluded to, right? And what Denver alluded to earlier as well. Automated load management can address infrequent instances of concurrent demand. So by throttling loads or pausing home loads, demand can be intelligently controlled in real time for non-essential loads, saving thousands of dollars versus the cost of a service upgrade. So in plainer terms, with SPAN, you are able to pause loads or throttle loads. For example, an electric vehicle charger coupled with SPAN, whether it's the SPAN drive system, which I'll talk about shortly here, or any other electric vehicle charging system, plugged into a branch breaker of SPAN, you, in a high concurrent demand situation, are able to pause that load or throttle that load to basically allow for the panel to continue to operate, not max the main breaker out, and also have the ability to, in non-high demand times, be able to get a full 11 kilowatt hour charge on that electric vehicle. And that is just one load that we're talking about here. This is a possibility with any electrical load down the line as the panel can continue to get intelligent as it will when we update software and update firmware. The hardware is there to allow for load pausing and load throttling for several appliance types. Span Drive is a product that we'll be shipping in the next couple of months here, which is our electric vehicle charger. It's an accessory item to the panel. It needs to be plugged into a Span panel, but it does some very compelling things and exciting things because it is plugged to a Span panel. Namely, what I spoke to a minute ago, it unlocks level 2 charging for any home, non-dependent upon the service that's coming into the home. So you can get 11 kW charging on, say, 125 amp service and not have to derate the charger or upgrade the service to the home. You can drive on sunshine, meaning you can charge the car in the middle of the day directly from the solar panels if you have them, to avoid peak time energy charges, or to avoid folks charging during the middle of the day and giving a high demand to the utility company while all charging at the same time during the day potentially. You can also charge in an outage. If you have a home battery system that we are compatible with, you can still charge your car while there is an outage, so that the home battery will transfer energy to the car battery. And that's pretty much it as far as what we're doing at Span. We do believe that we have a unique product, and we're very excited about the mission to help decarbonize. And I'm excited to meet everybody in here and open up a discussion if there are any questions. I believe that partnerships amongst all of us are going to help us, is really the only way to get to the decarbonization goals we're all aspiring to. So thank you very much for your time and listening to the spiel and what we're doing at Span.
That's great, Scott. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions in the discussion section. So Thomas, shall we turn to Ezra? You may be on mute.
I'm ready.
Well, I'll let you handle your own introduction because I did yours on mute. So, go.
I love the picture, Ezra. Are you trying out for the next 007?
Yeah, very long line. So first of all, thank you all for spending some time with us today. And for CleanStart for the opportunity to take you through some material that we have prepared that we thought germane to this discussion. For those of you that don't know, Energea, we're a small boutique firm with offices in Davis, California, and Sydney, Australia. And so I will be leveraging some of the experience from Australia, mainly because they are in a little bit of a tighter spot than we are here in California, but I do think California is doing its best to catch up. So let me share my content and we'll go through it, and then I look forward to the discussion to follow. Zoom share.
There we go.
All right, can everybody see my screen?
We're still waiting.
Waiting. That would be
There we go.
Comcast. Okay,
There we go.
great. All right, we're going to talk about some things, some inverter issues and inverter options, and then solution assessment. Now, we've chosen to focus on the impacts of rooftop PV because in a lot of ways, they're creating the value that can then be addressed by more flexible loads and by some of the solutions that Scott and the previous gentleman discussed with respect to SMUD. So just to show you where different jurisdictions are with respect to rooftop PV, and I'll get into why this matters. You can see here on the bottom left, everybody knows about Hawaii, right? Hawaii, if you ever go there, I was there, I think over Christmas, and like you literally look everywhere and it looks like this. Actually, it looks even more rooftop than what we're seeing here. I mean, it is everywhere, and they've got a concerted program to get PV out there because they realize there's just not a lot of land space for them to do their own utility scale stuff. But behind Hawaii, I mean, California is quite a bit behind. Now these are a couple of years out of date, but they are reflective of trends, and then it sort of goes down from Arizona, et cetera. Now you jump to Australia, And you can see the leaders there are in the 31%. So they're sort of like Hawaii, except for they're not a tiny little grid in the middle of nowhere. They're a bigger state. Keeping in mind that all of Australia, I think, has the population of Connecticut. So it is a big place with not a lot of people. And South Australia has the distinction of, I think, being one of the first megawatt scale or grid connected scale system that is operating with no load for periods of time because of the behind the meter meets renewables, and they're testing the boundaries of network security. So it's I think a good market to be aware of in terms of what they're experiencing, what some of their challenges are, and how they're overcoming it, and then how this technology is being used or could be used so that you can sort of position for and anticipate what this future looks like. So one of the key outcomes of having all this solar is you tend to be out of voltage. So you've got a lot of real power coming onto medium distribution, low distribution networks. And what we're seeing here is that we have, in this particular market, voltage out of spec for which is greater than 215 volts. Now, you might say, hey, we're 110, I think. So just by the way, I'm an economist, so any electrical things I get wrong, that's my excuse. But what you may not know is that most of your big devices in your home run phase to phase, which is a 220 system. So we're not all that different when it comes to the larger power consumption. But what we're showing here is that there are a huge amount of sites. These are all sites with solar PV that are experiencing over voltage. And when you have over voltage, it can lead to self-curtailment of smart inverters. The dumb inverters keep going and create problems elsewhere, but increasingly, and in California, if you install a new inverter, it's going to have the smarts that start to curtail when there is too much real power. It might go into different sort of power factor modes, et cetera. But at the end of the day, too much real power and impedance leads to overvoltage and curtailment. And so here's a graphic of the estimated level of curtailment of a solar PV system as you get more and more of that solar PV on the network. Now, this was done on Australian distribution systems. So this is an 11 kV system. I can't remember SMUD runs an 11 kV, 12 kV. So it's pretty close in terms of the amount of the voltage and the sizing of the network. And what this is telling us is that in these states, they're already having significant amounts of curtailment. And if you cash that out at the wholesale market price, this is how much people who buy solar are paying by not being able to generate their electricity because of this curtailment. And this is something we don't have it now in SMUD's territory. We don't have it now in most of the other networks except Hawaii. But as we get more and more rooftop solar, and I know the CPUC might be doing its best to undermine additional rooftop solar with their NEM3, so it may slow down. But this is the sort of hidden cost. And on top of that, you've got the networks investing. So these are all the networks and how much they're planning to invest the next 5 years to try and deal with this voltage management issue, to increase their hosting capacity. And hosting capacity, hopefully, is something that is familiar to people on this call. It's the level of additional solar PV or batteries that can be supported by the network. On the load side, it would be the additional peak demand that could be added, for example, when you add your 2 new Teslas. All right. So what is being driven by this solar uptake? And so we looked and we researched both overseas in Germany, Norway, the UK, and for them, California, as well as what's being reported in Australia. And you see a wide range of issues from voltage management issues, flicker, harmonics. What I think might catch your eye though is thermal limits. So it's most of the challenges early on when you've got too much solar is that it's difficult to manage the voltage range because the voltage control schemes just weren't designed for this much dynamic range. But what people don't realize is as you get more and more of this capacity on the network, that it can start to drive thermal upgrades, i.e. the system that's out there is built for assumptions around how we use electricity for our air conditioning, for example. And as we put more on there because of electrification, we're going to use more of that, and that's going to increase our requirements. But the grids weren't necessarily built with that in mind. and they weren't built for power going the other way. So thermal's increasingly an issue. There's protection maloperation where you thought electricity is going to go this way, but actually goes both ways, and the protection devices are making an assumption that has to be changed. There's a whole range of potential costs of getting more and more solar on the system, and we need to get more and more solar on the system, or wind, to drive out the carbon. So what we did is we did another research action, which was to look at, okay, well, what are the different ways you can deal with this hosting capacity issue? And we looked in Australia, and we looked at California, Germany, Norway, and UK. And what we found was that it was a range of solutions, from new kinds of price signals, granular price signals. I think that's code for critical peak pricing. I think that was mentioned by SMUD. To changing inverter settings, reconfiguration of the network. And one of the key reconfiguration options is load balancing or PV balancing, etc. And each of these have different costs. So what we then did was to sort of weigh up, okay, well, what is the opportunity for different behind the meter resources, including flexible load? And you can see here, the main ones we looked at here were implementing the volt VAR smart inverter setting, which basically automatically curtails or manages volts and VAR settings so that you stay within your voltage limits, to new VPPs for smart EV charging, new VPPs for smart water heating, electrical water heating, obviously, new on-load tap changers. So this is changing out your transformer so that it has on-load rather than the offload. The offload is, most LV transformers are going to be offload if they have any sort of taps at all. Then we have the no new PV, which is just saying, nope, you can only install 3 kilowatts. After that, no more. Not a popular option with consumers or voters. And then there's another one called offload tap reconfiguration. And that's been what has been used in Australia to get them to sort of that 30% level. And what that means is you actually just go out and reconfigure which phase the inverters are connected to. And that has a really important effect. And having a balanced system in terms of where the solar is and where the load is gets them a long way. But even that has its limits. So what we did is we looked at, given the changing costs over time, and also the limitations of how much additional capacity you can achieve. For example, offload tap changers is not going to allow you to get 100% of solar. It can get you up to about 30%. Then you got to do something else. And it depends if you're in the urban environment, rural, or more of a suburban area. It also has different cost structures. You can see here in the rural areas, because of the cost of the grid solution and going out there and do phase balancing in the middle of nowhere, that we actually see the EV charging and smart water heating, which are the two cheapest, to be the cheapest solution for the network, right? So this is going to look different for different networks. This is not necessarily what SMUD's network is going to look like, but this is the kind of thinking that the most advanced utilities are doing at the moment. So they make sure that they don't just keep putting out the most expensive solution that they're used to, like more transformers, but they're looking for these smarter solutions. And we see here on the bottom right an illustration of how might a utility make least cost investments over time, as on the way to supporting, pretty much everybody having some rooftop having some solar on the rooftop. And you can see here that the phase imbalancing gets you so far, but if you want to continue to achieve, going above 50%, you need to start having other solutions, like putting in some voltage limits, some inverter curtailment, and then ultimately to get higher than that, you might include some thermal limits and some frequency response limits. So this is not using smart technology. This is basically just having more and more kinds of curtailments on there. But what we're ultimately wanting to do is replace this with these other least cost solutions. I'm almost there. So one final thing I'll leave you with is the modeling we did showing a typical peak summer day averaged load profile. This is this is a peak summer day load profile. So this is the time that drives grid investments for peak demand. You can see for a detached customer, you can see if they've got no gas. So this is electrified house, and this has got no gas and EV. And you can see here that your ability to your contribution to peak demand goes up and can drive costs if you don't do any sort of smart management of either your water heating solution in this case or EVs. Now, at the far end of where we expect this to go in 2030, where all this technology has been adopted and is working well, we can see the impact of the PV on that same load profile. We can see the battery taking load away from the evening peak and moving it into the to the early morning hours. And we can see water heating also, for the most part, being charging at this time. And what we ended up having there is the ability to have households pretty much get a very flat load factor. I'm not saying this is what you actually want to do, because you've got to have to shape your load so that you are using more in the middle of the day. And the graphic Excel may not do this justice in terms of being clear, but after you have solar coming on, you've got to charge your water heater. You can deliver a very low cost to serve load profile for the remaining grid, which is fundamentally driven by what's called your load factor, the relationship of your average load to your peak demand, or even just your peak demand. It's also important to see on the max output day that once you have the ability to move load around, you might have a huge amount of PV coming out of there, but you're going to try and fill that up with smart charging your water heater, a bit of your battery, and then you'll have a little bit of negative load here, but you'll still keep it much lower than if that was exporting the whole time. So this is, I guess, how we see all of this technology we're talking about deployed and its impact to minimize how much it costs the grid to serve it. Now, this is the final slide. There's a bunch of technology that needs to be put in place. SMUD did a wonderful job walking us through that. Whether it's the distribution system operating platform or it's the distributed energy resource management system, these are all sort of key platforms that the utilities will need to invest in order to send the right signals and provide the coordination required at the system level. I'd like to leave you though with a key statement, which is, in our view, technology is not the problem. Not the technical barrier. There's all kinds of great new technology coming online, and it's going to get better and better. The key things that we need as an industry to tap the full value of that technology and to encourage optimal investments by consumers and their advocates is to remove a number of key barriers. One is enabling utilities in particular to have a much finer and more accurate understanding of their cost of service data so that they can make accurate trade-offs. The data on cost of service is very coarse-grained and not very well understood. We need rate reform so that if you want to trade with your neighbor, don't use any of the system besides your low voltage conduit, that you're not charged for parts of the network you don't use. It's important that if you have some kind of resource that you're able to access all those benefits and not a fraction of them, which is the case in most places at the moment. And that the whole process of procurement is done not in a piecemeal way, but in a way that allows investors to say, oh, I've actually got a significant market over the next 10 years. I'm going to make that kind of investment that is appropriate for that, not hey, we've got a little project over here, but we don't know if there's going to be any other projects. And so you can't get the sort of investment levels to really create this industry as a result. Now, we see a lot of movements in a lot of places to address a lot of these. So I do think these will be overcome, but I just want to highlight that the problems are not technical, they're institutional. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ezra. Very good. So I think we'll move into the discussion portion of the evening. Fascinating stuff. And what's ringing in my head is some of the things that you said, Ezra, so I'm going to start there. When you say smart water heating, I think one of the trends that people are trying to encourage in California is heat pump water heating, not resistance heating. Smart water heating to me means controlling the resistance heater. Of course, that has a coefficient of performance less than 1. The heat pumps are going to be around 3. So, I mean, it's a difference in maybe there's no real distinction. But when you're talking about smart water heating, would this also apply to the heat pump water heating installations that we're trying to encourage? That's to Ezra.
So moving to heat pumps is really important just from an energy perspective. You're going to go from maybe a 4 kilowatt element for the really big units to something more like 500. And SMUD's a real leader in this area in terms of trying to promote heat pump adoption. It reduces how much you have to play with, though. Really, our definition of smart here is when you put that energy into the cylinder, right? So over the course of a day, you need to put in a certain amount of heat to make it available, and you've got a fair bit of flexibility. So it's really about being smart as to when you do that charging. Other things we've seen are dynamic resistance charging, where you use a switch mode power supply to sort of turn up and down your resistive load. And from an energy efficiency point of view, that's not very efficient. But if you need to soak up a lot of energy that's coming out of PV, it's one option.
So turning to Scott and what Span will provide, I mean, you're starting with the EV charging, and very smart given the impact that's making on the grid. But when you said that you would have a breaker panel where all circuits would be addressable, it seems like that lends itself to what Ezra's talking about, is if you could fine tune the solar that you have and the assets on the grid generally, you could be controlling the water heater, the refrigerator from the panel. Is that basically where Span is heading?
Yeah, absolutely. The relay system at the branch level and at the main breaker level is all controlled and monitored by software that at some point in time will be accessible by utilities and set on a scheduling system by the homeowner. That's sort of a more elegant set and forget type scheduling scenario to tell the home what circuits to have on at certain times of the day and what not to have on at other times of the day, and et cetera. And the goal is to be partnered with utility companies to provide utility companies with the data and potentially the control for certain programs to be able to assist homeowners that have opted into such programs to be able to control loads, any load within the home, but specifically in these cases, the more high current loads and the more active loads during peak time hours.
And how about another trend? I mean, and we had Wallbox give a talk recently, bidirectional charging, because you were talking about, even in an outage, being able to charge your EV, which frankly would be a pretty good sales point for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, that's sorry, go ahead.
How does the panel deal with the possibility of charging the home off of the car and the integration of the coming number of bidirectional chargers that are probably going to be installed?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of R&D regarding that. Obviously, that's a huge marketing thing right now, vehicle to home, especially with all of the commercials that Ford with the Ford Lightning have released, and some of the specs that they've released, and some of the partnerships that they've announced, and how exactly they plan to deploy vehicle to home at scale. We are actively doing research to accommodate such ability. That is more of a hardware R&D than it is a software R&D. And we are working on R&D for hardware additions to panels or future models of the panel that will be able to accommodate vehicle to home charging.
Well, that would be a good integration of a lot of stuff. I mean, sort of the vision now, as people have been presenting these various solutions, is you're going to have to build another garage just to have all the devices in the home. But the more that they can be consolidated, obviously, that's what the homeowner wants to see. But turning to Denver, I mean, Ezra is basically saying in his presentation, there's more that we can make out of the PV panels that are going on rooftops. And, managing the loads can have a bigger benefit than just what it's doing for the grid. I don't know how much of a problem in the SMUD territory over voltage on the homes that have the solar panels on there. But are you familiar at all with this problem that Ezra was describing in the SMUD area?
Sure, we're very familiar with the theory of this problem as it exists. In the SMUD service territory, we have the good fortune of serving a fairly small regional footprint with a fairly dense population, and our circuits typically don't have the long runs or the high PV adoption because of our rates being so much lower than some of our neighboring IOUs. We don't have the same PV value proposition, certainly that you see in Hawaii or in other parts of California. So we don't have the adoption levels, and we don't have the long feeder runs that result in that voltage fluctuation either. We're aware at high penetration levels that we'll start to see a lot of issues related to PV overproduction. Our current strategy with PV is to heavily incentivize PV plus storage. We've got several programs rolling out to allow storage devices to take advantage of that critical peak pricing rate to help avoid curtailment, help us as a system avoid curtailment of PV during those daytime overproduction hours by encouraging distributed systems to suck that up and then release that energy later during the peak times. We've even got a higher incentive level with our My Energy Optimizer program, where we're offering customers $2,500 upfront incentive plus recurring credits for allowing more granular control of their storage systems according to hourly wholesale prices, where you're going to see those negative pricing and overgeneration and curtailment effects in near real time. So we're definitely incentivizing storage very heavily as both utility scale resources and distributed resources that really have a lot of flexibility to deal with a lot of different energy and capacity issues for us as we put our DERMS, our distributed energy resource management system, in place that gives the visibility to us into our distribution grid and the granular controls and signals necessary to influence not just the energy of these distributed devices, but really their ability to support the grid with voltage support and frequency support and PV smoothing. So storage is a big target for us and for our customers because of the value stacking, all the different things it should be able to do for us when we have those systems in place. To be able to orchestrate them as a stacked value resource. Again, the value to the customer for their resiliency, for their backup, for their autonomy and independence, and the shared value for that customer and being able to support the local infrastructure and be able to support their neighbors in need of energy. And ultimately the costs of transitioning to a clean energy economy.
So Ezra, given what you've learned in the Australian system and you're doing work obviously in California now, consulting work with some of the utilities, well, what would be on your wish list that as SMUD is rolling out what Denver's working on that you would like to see it have? What's a couple of the top items that you want to make sure are included in what SMUD is doing?
I mean, I've worked quite closely with some areas of SMUD in some of the analysis, so I'm pretty aware of the maturity of a lot of what they're doing. Is like they've been working on their DERMS solution for years, and I think they're one of the leaders in California, if not the country. And also they've got one of the most advanced electrification programs in the U.S. And I know that because we looked at it for a different utility. I think the thing I would wish for is just ensuring we get the incentives right, and that because if you don't pay, if there's not money on the table, they will not come. And so I think getting those signals right is just really important. Yeah, and that's been a challenge. What is the value of solar? What is the value of flexible demand? It really is a function of what your cost structure is, yeah. Sorry, but that's what I'd say. Usually, what's limiting the potential of these projects, whether it's LADWPs, sourcing of non-wires alternative stuff, or initiatives like this, it usually boils down to how much is being paid. And I often have seen the level of incentives be very conservative.
You said earlier, Ezra, that the technology is not the challenge, that we have advanced technologies at our disposal. And we do, from an engineering standpoint, these issues and challenges are approachable with the technology that we have at hand today, from an engineering perspective. But if you look at the larger system and its relationship to our social systems, our regulatory systems,
Institutional.
our institutional systems, for sure. It's much more challenging than just an engineering problem. But one of the things that we need to influence on the technical side is the commitment to standards, and repeatable ways that utilities can provide information to service providers and customers that achieve the technical result at the edge of the grid. We've got a lot of fancy technologies and really compelling energy systems arriving on our grid, but they all work a little bit differently and they all communicate a little bit differently, and the service providers all have different business models. It's very fractal, and it's very difficult and expensive to engage with those systems in a way that we can get the value out of them for the grid. And I think that's one reason that pricing is such a compelling and cost-effective approach. If we can really embed what we need from customers at that point of interchange, the meter, rather than from a grid services perspective, trying to peer behind the meter too much, really represent at the meter what it is we need from an energy standpoint, from capacity standpoint, voltage, frequency, in a universal language that is understood. Now we need programs to wrap that up in a way, again, that protects the customer experience and protects the customer price risk. And I think we've got a lot of compelling research going on that front, where it's really price as an operational signal that we're trying to dispatch, not necessarily as a economic signal. The economic signal can be a little bit simpler in the form of a fixed incentive, something that's very predictable, something that the customer is aware of and understands, or even a flat bill rate. We've got some interest and research going on in that direction, where we can deliver that technology-enabled flat bill with some boundaries around it, where the customer gets a predictable bill, which is really what they want in the end from a billing standpoint. And they're able to do that by us sending them economic signals that manage our costs in a way that we can deliver their energy within those boundaries is a very compelling opportunity that we want to pursue.
Well, let me turn to Scott. Where are you in deployment of span systems in California? Do you have some good traction here?
Yes, very good traction. Span has been installed the most in the state of California. We've installed span systems in over 35 states in the United States at this point in time. We have some very lofty goals for span installations throughout the country. We're headquartered in San Francisco. I'm based here in Sacramento. And the majority of our install, probably I would say 30 to 40% of the installs have come in California at this point in time.
Are they going into SMUD?
Yes, there have been several installs in the greater Sacramento area, so they would be communicating with SMUD utility.
So, I mean, one of the things that continually comes up in these discussions from the customer point of view is the surprise that I've put, solar panels on the roof. I may have battery storage in the garage, and then during an outage, none of it helps me because
Right.
we didn't do a sub panel. We didn't do automatic transfer switch.
Right.
I assume that a direction that SPAN is going is just take that problem off the table. You now don't have to have a sub panel because you can software manage where the power is going. And in terms of automatic transfer and automatic reclosing, that will be part of the issue too. Is that where you're heading?
Well, all of that is enclosed in the enclosure. From a software and hardware perspective, we virtualized the critical loads environment and made it real time. So any load landed in the panel in the 32 slots within the 200 amp residential single phase panel can be either a must-have, a somewhat critical load, or a non-essential load. There are 3 virtual buckets you can drag and drop circuits in, and you can create a default state as well, that whenever there is an outage, you as a homeowner in real time have the capacity and the control to make sure that you're backing up what you want to have backed up, and that you also know in that current state how much time you have available until the grid is restored.
Well, that'd be an excellent direction to see how that all unfolds. But
no, that's active today. That's happening.
You have that now, okay?
With battery systems today.
Well, I'm impressed by the approach of trying to avoid the service upgrades, because I know that's on a lot of people's minds too, as to how do we do all of this? And also, whatever we could do to take existing resources and apply them to the charging of the electric vehicle fleet without having to do some massive rebuild of the entire system is to everybody's benefit. So I think this has been one of the best conversations we've had on the distribution level grid and the interaction. Before I turn it back to Thomas, are there any other questions out there? Peter Mackin, you always have good questions. Is there something you want to ask to this panel?
No, not really. I mean, I think this was an excellent set of presentations. Scott, I did see your SPAN up front, up close and personal. Electrician brought it out and showed it to a few of us in Davis.
That's right.
And so just to clarify, so the panel today, if it was installed with a battery storage and a solar system and you had an outage, you can run parts of your house off the battery and charge from the solar because the main breaker would open, isolating your house from the grid, correct?
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah,
that is a function of the system and the hardware and the software today, as long as it is a system that we are integrated with. We're not integrated with every single battery system on the market.
Okay, yeah, so specific, well, you would need specific solar inverters too, or just the specific battery?
The battery is where the integration consideration needs to be approached.
Okay.
If it's solar only, we're compatible with most every PV inverter. But if there's a battery system involved that's where we built the code and the resources from the ground up for 2 particular systems at this point in time, and we're building them for other systems as well. But there are 2 systems that we are integrated with at this time for battery backup.
Perfect. Yeah, I guess the other thing that everyone should be aware of, because I asked the electrician, is that at this point the circuit control is on off only, right? You can't vary, except maybe on your EV charger, but everything else is basically it's on or it's off.
That is correct. The EV charger, our EV charger will have a throttle from 4 amps to 48 amps. Other EV chargers, it's a 0 or 1, an on off. And then for any other circuitry, any sort of load shedding is a on or off. We are doing a fair amount of research and development on being able to throttle other load types that make sense to throttle. Obviously, certain loads you don't want to do that for. But some appliances can allow for that, and we are looking into that sort of functionality with other appliances other than our electric vehicle charger.
Okay, cool, great, thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Peter. Well, Brandon, I think you're still joining with us. This is really something where I think SMUD should be commended for getting on the frontier of this whole activity. But I think given what's being discussed here, what you're already doing, what some of these creative minds were able to bring, SMUD being open to that creativity is being a pioneer, and it's probably going to advance the whole industry nationwide faster. So I would imagine you're pretty pleased with the way things are going here, but just let me ask if you have any other comments or questions to add.
No, thanks, Gary. I agree with Peter and the rest. These have been excellent presentations tonight. A lot of good technical detail. I know I came across SPAN a few months ago and was excited about that prospect because I've had customers emailing me complaining about, potentially $20,000+ to bring in extra lines to upgrade their panels. And so any ability to reduce that makes electrification far more practical and cost effective. So these are great discussion, and it's good that we heard from the SMUD staff, we've given them a green light, right? We've been working on the DERM system, right, for the operators for years now as well. And a chunk of us are going off to Distributech in a week and a half. We'll keep up to date on PowerGen and Distributech are combined this year, and we'll keep up to date on what the latest is. So it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And round of applause to everybody who presented tonight. This has really been a great discussion. We very much appreciate your joining us. Sorry we couldn't get together in person, but COVID intervened once more in our lives. So June 2nd, we'll try to be back in person for the discussion on low carbon fuels and the other things that we've talked about. So Thomas, wrap us up here.
All right. So first I want to thank our presenters that came today. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for your patience of us moving from in-person to virtual at the last minute. I really appreciate it. Also, make sure you check out our past discussions for those of you out there. We have a lot of discussions around the grid from both SMUD researchers. Community Energy Labs just got funded through CalSeed for some work in California, so it's really interesting. I also want to thank our sponsors again. That's SMUD, Blue Tech Valley, and Weintraub Tobin. Our overall program sponsors of Reverent, Greenberg Chowig, Hacker Lab, and Moss Adams, and our community partners, and all of you for attending. Thank you very much, and have a good day, and enjoy your the coming weekend.
Yeah, we'll see you at the next meetup and the perspectives coming up. So thanks, everybody.